It was an ordinary afternoon in a small suburban neighborhood, but inside the modest home of Emily and her grandfather, time seemed to stand still. Emily, a bright-eyed girl no older than 6 or 7, stood by the window, her tiny fingers gripping the glass as she looked out at the world, her face a mixture of sadness and determination. She could hear her grandfather coughing softly from the next room. The sound echoed through the walls like a distant thunderstorm, a constant reminder that the man who had raised her, the man she loved more than anything in the world, wasn't going to be around much longer. Her heart felt heavy with a sadness far too large for someone her age. The doctors had given up hope. They said it was only a matter of time before her grandfather would slip away into the quiet of the night. They'd tried everything, every medicine, every treatment. Nothing seemed to work. But Emily refused to accept it. She couldn't accept that the man who had taught her to sing, to dance, to laugh through every difficult moment was now too weak to even sit up. Her grandfather, a retired schoolteacher with a warm, loving smile and a booming laugh that filled every room, had always been her hero. When her parents were busy with work, or when the world seemed too big for her small shoulders, he was the one who made her feel safe. He had taught her the importance of love, of music, of believing in the impossible. And now, as she stood there, by the window, her eyes sparkling with determination, she had made up her mind. There was one thing she could do, one thing she could give him. "I'll sing for him," Emily whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the soft rustling of leaves outside. She had learned a song from her grandfather years ago, a lullaby that he had sung to her when she was just a baby. He said it was a song of hope, a song that could heal any pain. With a deep breath, Emily walked to the living room where her grandfather lay pale and frail on the couch. His breathing was shallow and his eyes were closed, as though he were already drifting into another world. She sat beside him, carefully adjusting his blanket. "Grandpa, I'm going to sing for you," she said, her voice a mix of innocence and resolve. She closed her eyes and with a trembling breath, she began to sing. The notes of the lullaby filled the room, a soft melody that seemed to float in the air like a gentle breeze. It was a simple song, but Emily sang it with all her heart. She sang as if the very life of her grandfather depended on it, and as she sang, something strange began to happen. Outside the window, the sun seemed to shine a little brighter. The trees swayed just a little more gracefully, as if they too were listening. The air felt different, charged with something almost magical. But the most surprising thing of all? Keanu Reeves was walking by the house at that very moment. Keanu had just finished a walk in the park, enjoying the calm of the neighborhood. He'd always loved walking through this part of town. There was something about the peaceful streets and the old houses that reminded him of simpler times. As he passed Emily's house, a soft sound stopped him in his tracks. It was a voice, clear, sweet, and filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. He turned and looked toward the window where the sound was coming from. There he saw Emily, her small face lit up by the light of the afternoon, her eyes closed in concentration as she sang her heart out. Keanu was no stranger to music, nor to the power of a song. But there was something about this little girl's voice, the raw emotion in her voice, that stopped him in his tracks. He had never heard anything so pure, so full of hope, and yet so full of sorrow. As the song reached its final notes, Emily opened her eyes, looking up at her grandfather, who was still breathing softly. She smiled as if she knew, deep down, that her song had done something, that it had made a difference. Keanu stood there for a moment, taking in what he had just witnessed. He didn't know the full story, but he knew one thing for sure. There was something extraordinary about this little girl, something that could move mountains, or at the very least, change lives. And as Emily stood there, watching her grandfather, Keanu made a decision. He needed to know more about this girl, about her story. Something told him that this song, the song she sang with so much love, might be the key to something much bigger than either of them could understand. "Do you think her song will save him?" Keanu thought to himself, stepping closer to the door, unsure of what to do next. But one thing was certain. He had to find out. Before we dive deeper into Emily's touching journey and the miracles that might unfold, make sure you hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Stay with us. This story is just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Emily sat quietly by her grandfather's side, her tiny hand resting gently on his. The warmth of the room wrapped around her like a soft blanket, but the chill in the air seemed to match the heaviness in her heart. Her grandfather had not stirred after her song. He lay there still as ever, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Emily had done everything she could, but it didn't seem like enough. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the porch. She looked up, confused, as she saw a tall figure standing at the doorway. He was a man she didn't recognize, but there was something oddly familiar about him, something kind in his eyes. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice gentle and warm. "I heard the most beautiful song just now, and I couldn't help but wonder who the singer was." He paused, his gaze landing on Emily. "It was you, wasn't it?" Emily blinked, surprised. "Who are you?" "I'm Keanu," he said with a soft smile. "I was just passing by when I heard your song. It was incredible." Emily hesitated for a moment before nodding, her shyness kicking in. "It's a song my grandpa taught me," she said quietly. "I'm singing it for him because he's very sick. The doctor said he's not going to get better." Keanu felt his heart clench at her words, the pure hope in Emily's voice, despite the bleakness of the situation, was both heart-wrenching and inspiring. "I'm really sorry to hear that," he said softly, stepping inside and taking a seat across from her. "I can see how much you love him. That song, it was beautiful. There's something magical about it." Emily looked down at her grandfather, her small face furrowed with concern. "I think it will help him," she said quietly, her fingers gently brushing her grandfather's hand. "He always says that music can heal, that love can heal. I just want him to be okay." Keanu looked at her for a long moment, impressed by the depth of her belief despite her young age. He was used to seeing people in pain, but there was something about Emily's unwavering faith that struck him. He had seen so many people struggle, so many families battling impossible odds, but there was something different here. Her love for her grandfather was powerful, and her conviction was even stronger. "Music has a way of reaching places inside us that nothing else can," Keanu said thoughtfully, his voice full of understanding. He had known the healing power of music firsthand, having grown up surrounded by it. But sometimes even the most beautiful songs need a little help from others. "Maybe there's something I can do for you." Emily looked up at him, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" "Well," Keanu began, sitting forward in his chair, "I may not have the power to make someone better with music alone, but I know a lot of people who can help. There's a specialist at the hospital, a doctor who's worked on cases like your grandfather's. Maybe I can get you in to see him. And I also know a few musicians who've helped people in situations like this." Emily's eyes lit up, and for the first time in a while a tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest. "Do you think they could help Grandpa?" Keanu smiled gently. "It's worth a try, don't you think?" Emily nodded eagerly, feeling a little lighter than before. But there was still something in the back of her mind that made her hesitate. Her grandfather was stubborn. He didn't believe in relying on others. And though she wanted to give him everything, there was a part of her that feared it might not be enough. She had to believe, though. She had to try. Keanu could sense the conflict in her, so he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You know, Emily, sometimes people like your grandfather, people who have lived through so much, just need a little extra encouragement, a little extra love. And sometimes that comes from the most unexpected places." He stood up slowly. "I'm going to make a phone call, okay? I'll see what I can do." Emily's heart raced, but she nodded, grateful for the kindness of this stranger. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu smiled warmly at her, then walked out to the porch, his mind already racing with possibilities. He took out his phone and dialed a number he had memorized long ago, one that connected him to an old friend who happened to be one of the top specialists in the city. As he waited for the call to connect, his thoughts wandered back to the little girl inside. There was something about her, something that felt like fate. He had no idea what was about to unfold, but something told him that this was a moment he would never forget. Back inside, Emily remained by her grandfather's side, her fingers gently strumming the strings of the old guitar he had taught her how to play. Her song had filled the room with hope, and now all she could do was wait for the miracle that she believed was just around the corner. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story is only getting started. Don't miss out on what's to come. The next few days were a blur for Emily and her grandfather. Keanu kept his promise, reaching out to the doctor, and making sure Emily's grandfather got the care he needed. But despite all the efforts, Emily still couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She kept singing as she always had, but the weight of uncertainty hung heavy over her. One afternoon, while Emily was sitting in the small living room, strumming her guitar and humming softly, Keanu returned, this time with someone new. "Emily," Keanu said with a reassuring smile, "I'd like you to meet someone who's going to help." Standing beside him was a tall woman in a white coat, her face serious but kind. Emily felt a little nervous, but also curious. She had met so many doctors in the past few days, all with their medical terms and explanations, but there was something different about this woman. Her presence was calm, almost soothing. "Hi there, Emily," the woman said, kneeling down to her level. "I'm Dr. Sarah Collins. I'm a specialist in treating conditions like your grandfather's. I've been talking to Keanu, and we think we might be able to try something new. Would you mind if I took a look at him?" Emily nodded, her heart skipping a beat. She wanted so badly for this to work. Her grandfather had always believed in the power of healing through love and music, and maybe, just maybe, this new doctor could help combine that with real science. Together, they walked to her grandfather's side. The room was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Her grandfather, still frail but hanging on, looked up as Emily approached. "Grandpa," Emily whispered, "Dr. Collins is here to help. She's going to make you feel better." He looked at her with tired eyes but managed a faint smile. "You sing so beautifully, little one. If only your song could cure me." "Maybe it can," Emily replied with a hopeful smile, though her voice trembled slightly. "We'll find a way, Grandpa," Dr. Collins observed for a moment before addressing Emily's grandfather. "I'm not promising miracles," she said gently, "but there are ways we can manage your condition and improve your quality of life. Sometimes hope can come from the most unexpected places, and music, like Keanu said, can play a big part in that." The doctor spent the next hour checking on him, running through a series of tests and making some adjustments to his treatment plan. She explained everything to Emily and her family, reassuring them that they were on the right track, though it would take time. Keanu, who had been quietly observing in the background, approached Emily once Dr. Collins left for a quick meeting. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Emily bit her lip and looked down at her hands. "I'm trying to believe," she said softly. "I really am. But it's hard when I feel like I'm the only one who believes the song will work." Keanu knelt down to her level and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I know it's hard, but the fact that you're still believing, that's what's important. Don't stop singing. Because your belief, your love for your grandfather, that's the strongest medicine anyone can give him right now." Emily looked up at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and a flicker of doubt. "You really think so?" Keanu smiled, the warmth in his eyes reassuring her. "I know so." That evening, Emily sat by her grandfather's side once again, her guitar resting across her knees. She glanced over at the window, where the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. It was getting late, but she wasn't tired. Not yet. She closed her eyes, remembering the words of her grandfather, the man who had always been her strength. "Music is magic, Emily. It's a language that speaks to the heart." With those words in her mind, she began to sing again. The song was simple, but it was full of everything she wanted to say to him, the love, the hope, the belief that they could make it through this together. As the notes of the lullaby filled the room, something strange began to happen. Her grandfather, who had been still for hours, began to stir. His fingers twitched. His eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in days, a faint smile crossed his face. Emily's heart raced. She continued singing, her voice growing stronger with each passing moment. She could see the faintest color returning to her grandfather's face, his breaths now more steady. It wasn't a miracle, not yet, but it was something. It was progress. Keanu, who had been standing in the doorway watching silently, felt a surge of emotion. He had never seen anything like this. It wasn't just the song. It was Emily's unwavering belief in it, in her love for her grandfather. "She's something special," he whispered to himself. At that moment, Emily stopped singing, her voice faltering as she watched her grandfather's eyes open fully. She leaned over, taking his hand once again. "Grandpa." He blinked slowly, as though waking from a deep sleep. "You're still singing, little one," he murmured, his voice hoarse but filled with affection. "I'm not going to stop," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions she was feeling. "You're going to get better, Grandpa. We're going to make it through this." Her grandfather smiled weakly, his hand squeezing hers. "If anyone can make a miracle happen, it's you." The room was silent for a long moment as Emily and her grandfather shared a quiet, intimate connection. Keanu stood off to the side, watching the bond between them. He had witnessed something extraordinary that day, something he knew he would never forget. The days that followed were a blur of hope and quiet anticipation. Emily's grandfather, though still fragile, had shown signs of improvement. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but no one could explain the sudden change. His energy had slowly started to return. His laughter, though faint, was heard in the house once again. Emily, still singing for him every evening, felt the tension in the air shift, almost as though the song had become a bridge between two worlds, one of illness and one of recovery. It wasn't a cure, but it was progress. One afternoon, Emily was sitting at the small kitchen table, her crayons scattered across the surface, drawing pictures for her grandfather. She had always loved to draw, especially when she was trying to express feelings she couldn't put into words. Today she drew a picture of the two of them, her sitting on his lap while he held a book, their smiles wide and happy. As she worked, there was a knock on the door. It was a soft tap, the kind that suggested hesitation or perhaps uncertainty. Emily's eyes widened, and she jumped up from her chair, rushing to answer the door. When she opened it, she was greeted by a familiar face. "Keanu." "Hi, Emily," he said with a warm smile, holding a small box in his hands. "How's your grandpa doing today?" Emily stepped aside to let him in. "He's doing better," she said excitedly, her voice full of hope. "He's awake more, and he smiled at me this morning. I think he's getting better." Keanu raised an eyebrow, impressed. "That's amazing to hear. He's lucky to have such a wonderful granddaughter." As they entered the living room, Emily's grandfather, who had been resting on the couch, lifted his head when he heard Keanu's voice. His smile was slow but genuine. Well, if it isn't Keanu," he said, his voice rough but with a hint of playfulness. "You've come to check on me, I see." Keanu chuckled, pulling up a chair beside him. "I was just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by and see how my favorite patient is doing." Emily's grandfather, though tired, gave a faint nod. "I'm feeling a bit better thanks to Emily's music." He looked at her fondly. "She's been keeping me company with her songs. You wouldn't believe how soothing they are." Keanu looked over at Emily, his eyes filled with admiration. "You've got quite the gift, Emily. Your grandfather's right, your music is special." Emily beamed with pride, then turned back to her grandfather. "I'll sing again tonight, Grandpa. Just wait. You'll feel even better." Before Keanu could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. Emily looked over, confused. She wasn't expecting anyone else. Who could that be? She wondered aloud. Keanu stood up, giving her grandfather a reassuring smile. "I'll get it." When Keanu opened the door, there stood a tall, serious-looking man in a dark suit. His expression was unreadable, his gaze sharp as he looked at Keanu before glancing inside. "Excuse me," the man said in a low voice. "I'm looking for a young girl named Emily and her grandfather." Keanu, surprised by the man's sudden appearance, glanced over his shoulder to make sure Emily's grandfather was okay. Emily stood frozen, her eyes wide. "Who are you?" Keanu asked cautiously, standing between the man and Emily. The man paused for a moment, then spoke. "My name is David Anderson. I'm..." Well, I'm someone who's been following your family's story closely. His voice softened slightly. I'm with a research group, and we're studying a particular medical condition that your grandfather has. We believe there may be an unexpected connection between his recovery and the music his granddaughter has been singing. Keanu's brow furrowed. I don't understand. What do you mean? David shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. There are certain cases, rare ones, where music, especially songs with deep emotional connections, can have a significant impact on the body's healing process. Your grandfather's condition, while serious, has shown some remarkable improvement, and we believe it might be related to the emotional and physiological response to Emily's singing. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she absorbed his words. So you think my singing is helping Grandpa get better? David nodded slowly. Yes, it's a theory, but one we've been studying for some time, and the fact that we're seeing positive results in your grandfather's case is, well, it's something we need to investigate further. Keanu's mind raced. He wasn't a scientist, but something about this felt both surreal and deeply significant. And what exactly are you suggesting? David's gaze softened and he looked at Emily. What I'm saying is that your song, it's not just a song. It might be more powerful than you realize. We would like to study the impact of your music more closely. We believe there's something special about the connection between you and your grandfather, something that could help not only your grandfather, but many others who are in similar situations. Emily stood still for a moment, processing his words. It was a lot to take in, but the excitement was undeniable. You think my singing could help other people too? David smiled faintly. Yes, I do. We want to explore this further, to understand how and why it's working. Keanu turned to Emily's grandfather, who was watching the exchange with quiet interest. What do you think? Are you open to this? The older man's eyes twinkled. At this point, I'm open to anything, he said with a smile. If Emily's music can help others, then maybe it's time we see how far it can go. Emily felt a mixture of emotions. Confusion, excitement, and a sense of something larger than she could understand. She had always known her songs were important, but this was something new, something bigger. David turned to Keanu. We would like to document this with your permission. It could help a lot of people if we can understand the connection between the music and the healing process. Of course, Emily. And her grandfather would remain anonymous in any study or publication. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. We'll think about it. But you have our attention. As David walked out of the house, leaving them with more questions than answers, Keanu turned to Emily. Are you okay with all of this? He asked gently. Emily looked up at him, her heart full of hope. I just want Grandpa to get better, she whispered. If my singing can help more people, then I'll do it. I believe in it. Keanu smiled, his admiration for the little girl growing with each passing day. You've got a heart full of magic, Emily. Don't ever stop believing. As the door closed behind David, Emily felt a quiet sense of peace settle in her heart. There was so much ahead of her, so many questions, so much uncertainty. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid. She had something even more powerful than fear, love, hope, and the belief that her song could make a difference. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The story is just beginning and the best is yet to come. Emily couldn't stop thinking about the man who had knocked on their door. David Anderson. His words echoed in her mind and she couldn't help but wonder. Could her singing really help others the way it had helped Grandpa? It sounded almost too good to be true. But when she looked at her grandfather, who had been improving with every passing day, she couldn't ignore the possibility. Keanu's words stayed with her too. You've got a heart full of magic, Emily. Don't ever stop believing. That evening, as she sat by her grandfather's bedside, strumming her guitar, she felt a new sense of purpose. Her grandfather's slow but steady recovery was no coincidence. The doctors were doing their part, but it was the music, her music, that seemed to be bringing him back. She glanced at him. His eyes closed as he rested, but there was a smile tugging at his lips. The quiet hum of her song filled the room. For a moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was making a difference. The next day, Emily and Keanu took a walk around the neighborhood. The sun was bright, the sky clear, and Emily could almost hear the rustling of leaves in time with the melody she had been singing. Keanu noticed the change in her. There was a lightness in her step, a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "You're looking happier today," he said, a teasing smile playing at the corner of his lips. Emily shrugged but couldn't hide the grin spreading across her face. "I feel like I'm doing something important," she said, her voice full of wonder. "Grandpa's better, and maybe I can help other people too." Keanu's smile softened. "I think you already are, Emily. You just don't know how much yet." They stopped at a small park near their house, and Keanu sat down on a bench, patting the space beside him. Emily hopped up next to him, her legs swinging back and forth. It was a perfect afternoon, the kind that made everything feel like it could be fixed, that the world was a little bit kinder. Keanu looked at Emily with a serious expression. "I spoke with Dr. Collins today. She told me that the medical team is starting to believe there's something more to your singing. They want to conduct a full study, figure out how your voice is affecting your grandfather's recovery." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? They want to study me?" Keanu nodded. "They want to understand why your music is having such an impact. They're planning to record you singing and track your grandfather's progress. It's a little unusual, but it could help a lot of people if it works." Emily's mind swirled with the possibility. It was all so overwhelming. "I don't know. What if I'm not good enough? What if my singing doesn't actually help anyone else?" Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, you've already helped your grandfather, and that's the most important thing. If your song can help others, then that's just a bonus. You don't need to worry about being perfect. Just sing from your heart like you always do." She smiled, her nerves settling for the moment. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll sing for them. But I'll still sing for Grandpa the way I always have." Keanu grinned. "I think that's exactly what they need to see." The days that followed were filled with preparation. Dr. Collins and her team arranged a time to come over and set up their equipment to record Emily singing, but all of that seemed secondary to the one thing that mattered most: Emily's unwavering belief in her song. That evening, the house was quieter than usual as Emily prepared for the recording. Her grandfather was sitting up in his chair, watching her with a proud smile on his face. "Ready for your big moment?" he asked with a wink. Emily nodded, trying to hide the excitement bubbling inside her. "I think so. I just want to sing the song that makes you feel better, Grandpa. That's all I care about." Keanu, who had been helping set up the small recording equipment, turned to her with a smile. "Don't worry about anything else. Just focus on the music, and everything will fall into place." The room was filled with a sense of quiet anticipation as Dr. Collins and the medical team arrived, setting up their equipment. They were kind but serious, their faces focused on their work as they prepared to capture the magic that Emily had been sharing with her grandfather. Emily stood at the center of the room, her guitar in hand, looking at the small microphone placed in front of her. The team made a few last-minute adjustments, and then with a nod from Dr. Collins, Emily began to play. Her voice, soft but steady, began to fill the room. She sang the song she had sung for her grandfather countless times, the melody familiar and comforting, like a lullaby wrapped in love. The lyrics were simple, but they carried the weight of everything she felt: the hope, the faith, the love for the man who had raised her. As she sang, she could feel the connection between her and her grandfather, stronger than ever. She could hear him breathing steadily beside her, a smile on his face. He wasn't just listening to her music, he was feeling it. Dr. Collins and her team watched closely, recording everything, but there was a sense of awe in the air. Emily's song wasn't just a tune, it was a lifeline. When she finished the last note, the room was completely silent for a few moments. Her fingers trembled on the guitar strings, and she turned to see her grandfather, his eyes glistening with tears. "That was beautiful, Emily," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You've always had a gift, but now you've shown the world what love can really do." Keanu stepped forward, his voice soft but filled with admiration. "You've done something incredible, Emily, and I know that whatever happens next, this is just the beginning." Dr. Collins smiled warmly, her eyes thoughtful. "You've just given us something priceless, Emily, Whatever we discover from this study, it's clear that your music has the power to heal." Emily's heart soared, and in that moment she realized that her song wasn't just for her grandfather. It was for the world, and this was just the first step of a journey she was meant to take. The days that followed the recording were a whirlwind. The team, led by Dr. Collins, wasted no time in analyzing the data they had collected. Emily's song was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was as if the music wasn't just reaching the air. It was reaching something deeper, something physical within her grandfather's body. His health continued to improve, faster than anyone had predicted. Even the doctors were amazed at the remarkable recovery. Keanu, who had become more like family to Emily over the past few weeks, spent much of his time at the house supporting Emily and her grandfather. It was comforting to have him around. He was like a steady anchor in a sea of uncertainties. Monday afternoon, Emily and Keanu were sitting on the porch talking about everything that had happened. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the house. Emily leaned back in her chair, trying to absorb it all. "I still can't believe this is happening," Emily said, her voice filled with wonder. "Grandpa's getting better, and now there are people who want to study my singing." Keanu grinned. "It's pretty amazing, huh?" Emily nodded, looking down at her hands. "It feels like something bigger than me. I don't even know if I'm ready for all of this. What if I mess up?" Keanu placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to worry about that. You're already doing something incredible. You don't have to have all the answers. Just keep singing from your heart. That's all anyone needs." Emily smiled, comforted by his words. As they sat in silence for a moment, watching the evening sky turn from golden to pink, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had been so focused on the idea of helping her grandfather that she hadn't really thought about the bigger picture. But now it seemed clear. Her music was doing something much bigger than she had ever imagined. A few days later, they received unexpected news. The medical team had published their findings, and it quickly gained attention. The research was groundbreaking. Emily's song had a measurable effect on her grandfather's health, improving his cardiovascular function, boosting his immune system, and even alleviating pain. The media caught wind of the story, and soon people from all over the world were reaching out, eager to learn more. It wasn't long before a journalist from a well-known news outlet called to arrange an interview. Emily's heart raced at the thought of talking to someone from the press. She was still just a little girl, after all. She wasn't sure what she could say that would make any difference, but Keanu was there to help guide her through the process. "Just be yourself, Emily. You've already done the hard part, sharing your song. The world just wants to hear your story." The day of the interview arrived, and Emily found herself sitting in front of a camera, facing the reporter. Her grandfather was by her side, smiling proudly. Keanu sat across from her, offering silent support. "Emily," the reporter began, "tell us about the song you've been singing for your grandfather. How did you come up with it, and why do you think it's had such a powerful impact?" Emily's hands were folded in her lap, her heart racing as the camera light blinked on. She had practiced in front of the mirror, but now, with the world watching, everything felt different. She took a deep breath, then spoke softly but with conviction. "It's a song I've been singing for Grandpa since I was little," she said. "It's just something I made up, something that feels right. When he got sick, I kept singing it for him, and it felt like it helped him feel better. I didn't know if it was my song that was making him better, but now I think it might be." The reporter smiled warmly, nodding as she took in Emily's words. "And now your song has become something much bigger than just your grandfather's recovery. People all over the world are interested in how your music has affected your grandfather's health. How does that make you feel?" Emily paused, thinking for a moment. "I'm really happy that my song could help Grandpa, and if it helps other people too, then that's even better. I just want people to know that music can make a difference. It's something we all need, especially when things are hard." The reporter's eyes softened, clearly moved by Emily's sincerity. "You're an inspiration, Emily. Your song has touched so many people, and it's clear that it's not just about music. It's about the love and hope you've shared with your grandfather. It's truly remarkable." As the interview concluded, Emily felt a mixture of pride and humility. She never imagined that something as simple as her song could have such a far-reaching impact. She was just a little girl, singing for the person she loved most in the world. But somehow her music had reached far beyond the walls of their home, connecting with people everywhere. Days later, people from across the globe began reaching out. Messages poured in from people who had been inspired by Emily's story, people who had struggled with their own health challenges, families caring for loved ones, and even other children who had a song they wanted to share. Emily's song was more than just a melody. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, something as simple as love and music could light the way. One morning, as Emily sat in her room, reading through the letters that had arrived that day, Keanu walked in, holding a letter in his hand. "Hey, Emily, this came for you," he said, handing her the envelope. "It's from a family in another state. They've heard your story and they wanted to thank you for giving them hope." Emily opened the letter, her heart racing. As she read the words written inside, tears welled up in her eyes. The family had lost their mother to a long illness, but after hearing about Emily's song, they began playing music for their father, who was struggling with his own health. They thanked Emily for giving them a new way to support him, to show him love, and to bring him comfort in his time of need. Keanu looked at her, his voice soft. "See? You're changing lives, Emily, and it's just the beginning." For the first time, Emily realized the full extent of what she had done. Her song wasn't just for her grandfather, it was a gift for the world, and she had only just begun. To understand how powerful it truly was, hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The ripple effect of Emily's song is only growing, and you'll want to be part of it. Emily's heart was full of hope and excitement, but also a little nervous as the world began to take notice of her story. She had never intended for any of this to happen. All she wanted was to help her grandfather, and now her song had become a symbol of healing for so many others. People from different countries, different backgrounds, were reaching out, and Emily was learning more about the incredible power of music. But as Emily continued to sing for her grandfather, there was something new creeping into her mind. It wasn't fear, but something close, something like pressure. She felt the weight of everyone's expectations. They weren't just asking her to sing anymore, they were asking her to be the answer. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that. One evening, after a particularly emotional phone call with a mother who had lost her child to a terminal illness, but was inspired by Emily's story to start playing music for her remaining children, Emily felt overwhelmed. She slipped away from the house to a quiet spot in the garden behind her family's home, where her guitar rested against the old oak tree she always loved. Sitting down on the soft grass, Emily closed her eyes and strummed a few notes. The wind rustled through the trees, and she could hear the faint hum of the city in the distance, but for once it all felt too far away. She was just a little girl with a guitar, singing because it felt right. But now it felt like the world was asking for more from her. Keanu appeared in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light inside. He walked slowly over to her, sensing that something was on her mind. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, softly, his voice always so calming. Emily shrugged, trying to hide the thoughts swirling in her head. "I don't know, Keanu. What if I can't help everyone? What if I'm not enough? What if this whole thing was just a fluke, and one day my song won't be able to help anyone anymore?" Keanu sat down beside her, his gaze thoughtful. "I think you're underestimating yourself," he said quietly. "You're not here to solve the world's problems. You're here to do what you do best. Share your love, your heart, through music. And that's enough. People need to feel connected. They need to feel hope. And that's what you're giving them. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real." Emily looked at him, her brow furrowed. "But what if the world needs something more than just me? What if one day people stop believing in my song?" Keanu smiled gently, his eyes full of warmth. "Emily, I've seen the way your grandfather reacts when you sing. I've seen the way people are moved by your music. This isn't about being some kind of miracle worker. This is about something deeper. You've already given people something precious. The belief that healing can happen, that love can be powerful even in the darkest times. That's all anyone can ask for. Emily sat in silence, trying to absorb his words. After a long moment, she looked at Keanu and smiled. I never thought about it that way. Keanu winked. That's what I'm here for, to remind you of what you're doing. And remember, you don't have to carry all of this by yourself. You have your grandfather, you have me, and you have all these people who are supporting you. It was the first time in weeks that Emily had felt truly at peace. For so long, she had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, unsure of how to balance it all. But Keanu's words reminded her that it wasn't about perfection. It was about being true to herself, singing from the heart, and trusting that the people who needed to hear her would find comfort in that. Over the next few weeks, Emily continued to sing for her grandfather, the recording project gaining more and more traction. The medical community was beginning to understand the full impact of her music. The study into her voice's effects on health was only growing, and soon experts from across the world wanted to collaborate. But despite the growing attention, Emily still felt the same connection to her grandfather and her song. It was the music she had always sung for him, and no matter how big the world got, that's where it would stay, tied to the love she felt for him. One day, as Emily was sitting by Grandpa's side, strumming her guitar and singing softly, there was a knock at the door. Keanu, who was in the kitchen making lunch, called out, "I'll get it." Emily continued to play, but a few moments later, Keanu walked in with an excited look on his face. "Hey, Emily, you won't believe who's here?" Before Emily could ask, the door swung open and a tall, familiar figure stepped into the room. It was Dr. Collins, accompanied by a man Emily didn't recognize. He was holding a large envelope in his hand and looked very serious. "Emily," Dr. Collins greeted warmly. "This is Dr. Harrison. He's a leading researcher in integrative medicine, and he's been following your case. He's heard about the progress your grandfather's made, and he wants to talk to you about something important." Dr. Harrison smiled kindly at Emily, though his face held an air of curiosity. "It's an honor to meet you, Emily. We've been reviewing your case and the data, and it's truly fascinating. Your grandfather's recovery is unlike anything we've ever seen. We believe your music might be the key to something bigger." Emily's heart raced and her palms felt suddenly clammy. "What do you mean?" she asked hesitantly. Dr. Harrison opened the envelope and pulled out a sheet of paper. "What we've discovered is that your song, your voice, might be creating an entirely new way to approach treatment. We'd like to conduct a series of controlled trials to explore how your music can be used as part of a therapeutic protocol. This isn't just about your grandfather anymore, Emily. It's about changing the way the world views healing." Emily's mind swirled with the implications of what Dr. Harrison was saying. She had always believed in the power of music, but this was something beyond what she had ever imagined. They wanted to study her song as a legitimate form of treatment. It was both thrilling and terrifying at the same time. Keanu, who had been standing quietly by the door, walked over to Emily. "This is huge, Emily. But remember, none of this changes who you are or what you've been doing. You've already done something incredible." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt that old, familiar sense of wonder fill her heart. The world was opening up in ways she never expected. But the most important thing was that she still had her song, and that, she realized, was all she needed. The decision was made. After much discussion and several meetings, Emily and her family had agreed to participate in Dr. Harrison's research. The plan was for Emily to visit various hospitals and medical centers to record her song in controlled environments. They would study its effects on different patients, analyzing the impact of her voice on health conditions such as chronic pain, anxiety, and even neurological disorders. It was a huge leap, and Emily was still processing the idea that her song could be part of something so much bigger. As the weeks went by, Emily continued to sing for her grandfather. His recovery had been miraculous, and his doctors were in awe of the progress. But it wasn't just his health that was improving, it was his spirit. There was a lightness in his eyes that hadn't been there for years. It was as if he was being renewed, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Emily, too, was changing. The girl who once sat quietly by her grandfather's side, shy and unsure of her own abilities, had become something else. She had begun to see herself as part of something greater, a force for good, a beacon of light in a world that often seemed so dark. On a cool morning, as Emily and Keanu prepared for their first trip to a nearby hospital to participate in the research, Emily stood by the window looking out at the wide, open sky. The birds flew in formation, and she wondered for the first time whether her song could truly help more than just her grandfather. Could it heal the world? Could it reach people who had been suffering for years, people who felt hopeless and lost? Keanu knocked gently on the door. "Ready for your first big day, Emily?" Emily turned around, her face serious but hopeful. "I think so. I'm a little nervous, but I know Grandpa would want me to do this." Keanu smiled warmly, his reassuring presence grounding her. "You're going to do great. You're not alone in this. You have all of us with you." They arrived at the hospital shortly thereafter. The medical team greeted them warmly, and Emily was escorted into a bright, quiet room where patients were already waiting for her. Some of them were sitting in chairs, others lying on beds, their faces etched with worry and pain. Emily's heart went out to them, but she was determined to help. Dr. Harrison introduced her to the group of doctors who would be observing the experiment. "We've set up everything, Emily. You just need to sing your song as you would for your grandfather. We'll be monitoring everything, heart rates, stress levels, pain responses, all of it. Just let the music flow and we'll see what happens." Emily took a deep breath, gripping her guitar. The room was silent except for the faint hum of machines and the soft shuffle of nurses in the background. She looked at the faces before her, their eyes filled with expectation. For a brief moment, she felt that pressure again, that sense of needing to be perfect. But then she thought of her grandfather, of how much he had meant to her. She thought of how her song had helped him and how she'd never given up on him. With a quiet resolve, Emily began to strum the first few chords. The room seemed to breathe. With her, the notes floating in the air, carrying a warmth that filled the space. At first, there was no immediate reaction, but then, one by one, the patients began to shift. Some closed their eyes, others let out small sighs of relief. One patient, a woman in her late 40s who had been lying in a hospital bed for days, began to smile faintly as she listened. A few minutes later, she started to sit up, her eyes filled with wonder. It was subtle at first, but the effect was undeniable. Emily's song was having an impact, just as it had with her grandfather. As Emily continued to sing, Dr. Harrison watched intently, scribbling notes on his clipboard. He nodded, signaling to the team that the results were promising. Keanu stood at the back of the room, quietly observing, his heart swelling with pride for Emily. When Emily finished the song, she lowered her guitar, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The room fell silent for a moment before Dr. Harrison spoke. "That was incredible, Emily," he said softly. "You've just witnessed the first of many breakthroughs. We've measured a marked decrease in stress levels and pain in several of the patients here today. This is something we've never seen before." Emily felt a flush of pride wash over her, but she quickly turned to the patients who were now showing signs of relief. The woman who had been lying in bed was sitting up with a bright smile, her eyes twinkling as if she had just been given a new lease on life. "Thank you, Emily," the woman said, her voice trembling. "I haven't felt this good in weeks. I don't know how to explain it, but your music, it helped, it really helped." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she smiled at the woman. "I'm so happy it helped," she whispered. "That's all I ever wanted." Dr. Harrison approached her, his voice filled with awe. "This is just the beginning, Emily. We'll need to do more studies, but what we've seen today is extraordinary. You're not just singing a song, you're giving these people something they've been searching for. You're giving them hope." Keanu walked over to her, his presence a steadying force. "You did it, Emily. You've changed everything." But as the days turned into weeks, Emily began to feel the weight of what lay ahead. Every patient, every person who reached out was depending on her. The pressure, once a small whisper, now felt like a constant companion. She wondered if she could keep up with the expectations. Could she keep helping these people without losing herself in the process? One evening, as Emily sat by the window, the familiar hum of life outside seemed distant. Keanu appeared at the door again, this time with a different kind of smile on his face. "I think it's time for you to take a break." "Emily," he said gently, You've done more than enough. You've given your song, and that's more than anyone could ask for. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." Emily looked at him, her heart filled with gratitude. She realized then that she didn't have to do it all by herself. The world didn't expect her to be perfect. It just needed her to be real, to keep singing from the heart. With a deep breath, Emily picked up her guitar again, strumming a soft melody. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what came next, she had already done something extraordinary. Her song was more than just music. It was a gift, and the world had already begun to feel its warmth. The weeks following Emily's groundbreaking performance in the hospital were filled with both triumph and moments of doubt. Emily's song was now being used in various medical settings, helping patients manage pain, stress, and anxiety. Research into the therapeutic effects of her music was expanding, with more hospitals and clinics reaching out to study her work. But despite the positive results, Emily found herself questioning what all of this meant for her future. She hadn't expected things to progress so quickly. What started as a simple act of love for her grandfather had spiraled into something much larger. People were calling her a healer, a miracle worker, and while Emily appreciated the sentiment, it weighed heavily on her. She had always just been a little girl with a guitar, singing because it made sense. She never imagined it would lead her here. Sitting on the porch of her house one evening, Emily watched the sun dip below the horizon. Keanu, as always, was there beside her, his calm presence offering her a sense of peace amidst the chaos of her thoughts. "You know," Emily said quietly, "I never asked for any of this. I never wanted the attention or the pressure or any of the expectations. I just wanted to help Grandpa." Keanu nodded, understanding all too well the complexities of the situation. "I know, Emily. And I think that's what makes this so powerful. You're not doing this because of fame or recognition. You're doing it because you care. And that's what's inspiring so many people. You've given them a glimpse of hope, a reminder that love and music can heal." Emily looked at him, her brow furrowed. "But what if one day it's too much? What if I don't have the strength to keep going? What if people stop believing in me?" Keanu smiled gently, his eyes full of wisdom. "You're only human, Emily. You don't have to save the world. You've already done something incredible. You've shown people the power of love and music, and you've inspired others to find their own way to heal." Emily took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling in. She had been so focused on trying to help everyone that she had forgotten one crucial thing. She needed to take care of herself too. She needed to keep her own heart open, just as she had for her grandfather. The next morning, Emily woke up early, as she always did. The house was quiet, and she wandered into the living room where her guitar sat waiting for her. For the first time in weeks, she picked it up without any expectations. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She just wanted to play. Her fingers gently touched the strings. A familiar melody filled the room. It was the song she had first written for her grandfather, the one that had started everything. The simple, heartfelt tune resonated with a deep, unspoken truth. It wasn't just about healing others. It was about healing herself, too. In that moment, Emily understood that her music wasn't a tool for saving the world. It was a way to connect with herself, to find peace in a world that often felt overwhelming. As the song came to a close, Emily felt lighter. She realized that, no matter what the future held, she didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. She could still be herself, just a little girl with a guitar, sharing her love and healing through music. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and when she opened it, she was met with the familiar face of Dr. Harrison. He had been a steady presence in her life over the past few months, helping guide her through the research and supporting her every step of the way. "Good morning, Emily," he greeted warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Emily smiled. "Not at all, Dr. Harrison. What's going on?" He stepped inside, holding a stack of papers in his hands. "I just wanted to update you on some of the research results. We've been receiving feedback from the hospitals, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive. Your music has not only helped with pain management, but also in reducing anxiety, and improving the emotional well-being of patients. We're on the verge of something truly transformative. Emily's heart swelled with pride, but also a quiet sense of wonder. She had never expected any of this to happen, and yet here she was making a real difference in the world. "I'm glad to hear it's working," Emily said softly. "But what does that mean for me? What happens now?" Dr. Harrison smiled. "Well, Emily, this isn't just about your song anymore. It's about starting a new movement, a movement where music and love can be used as part of a holistic approach to healing. We've had doctors and researchers from all over the world reaching out to us, wanting to collaborate on new studies, to explore how music can play a role in modern medicine." Emily blinked in disbelief. "Wait, so you mean this could actually change the way people look at healing?" Dr. Harrison nodded. "Exactly. You've sparked something, Emily. You've shown the world that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about connection, about feeling seen and heard, about the comfort of knowing someone cares. And that's something people need now more than ever." Keanu, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, stepped forward. "That's incredible, Emily. You're not just changing lives. You're changing the way the world thinks about healing." Emily looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Keanu smiled, his eyes softening. "You did it yourself, Emily. All I did was remind you of who you are." With those words, Emily knew that the future held endless possibilities. She wasn't just a little girl with a guitar anymore. She was a symbol of hope, a reminder that love and music could heal even the deepest wounds. But she didn't need to carry that weight alone. She had her family, her friends, and a world full of people who believed in her. As the days went on, Emily continued to sing for her grandfather and for the world. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them, one song at a time. And no matter how big or small the impact, she would always stay true to the one thing that had started it all, her love for music and the people she cared about. Thank you for following Emily's incredible journey. Be sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The story may have come to an end, but Emily's song will continue to resonate in hearts everywhere. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories to come.